Hi Dance Family, I'm going to give you the best exercises and or stretches for your hamstrings and your hip flexors. A common area of either weakness and or tightness in our bodies and our dancing bodies, and we can improve that with a theraband. So I have a 5-foot length of latex theraband I just bought on Amazon, and they also come in non-latex if you're allergic, but get one of these and then join me on the floor. Let's talk about your hamstrings. Hamstrings running behind the leg, attaching at the pelvis, the sitting bones, and at the knee joint at the sides and back. There's actually 3 muscles that comprise the hamstring on each side. The primary muscle action is flexion of the knee. So that's what the hamstrings do best. And then the other thing that they do a little bit weaker is they assist the gluteal with taking the leg back. We call that hip extension. But we're going to focus on the action at the knee and unlock the hamstrings. And you will just simply attach your theraband to the foot, and you can hold with a little resistance. So I'm just going to adjust my resistance here. And I'm going to hold the band in my right hand. It's my right leg, right hand. And I run the theraband off the outside of the thigh and brace the front of my right knee. What I'm doing here is actively bending and straightening my knee, so I'm activating my quadricep muscle in the front. And we know, muscle physiology says, that when you contract a muscle, the opposite muscle releases. So the opposite muscle in this case is the hamstrings. I'm pausing with a contraction on the quadricep and assisting slightly with the band, pulling on that elastic band and pressing and stabilizing the left hand on the thigh. Why? Because since the hamstrings attach at the base of the pelvis, I don't want the pelvis to move around too much. So when I brace the front of the thigh, I can stabilize the pelvis in what I call neutral, which is just a neutral set for the pelvis so that the lower back is not tucked or flattened towards the floor. After about 10 of these, I'm going to have you hold on with a relatively high resistance and simply, with a straight leg, slide the opposite leg out and press down into the resistance of the band. It seems a little counterintuitive because now I'm contracting the hamstrings, and then I'm going to work to bring that leg even higher by using the hip flexors, the muscles that raise the leg attached to the front. Why am I doing that? So that I can again contract one side of the body to allow the opposite side to release. The opposite side in this case is, you guessed it, the hamstrings. And I'll do that 10 times as well. A 1 to 2 second, 3 second pause at the end of every range. So it's actually muscularly strengthening my body as it's also actively lengthening the hamstrings. Do that on both sides and tell me how that feels. Now, if I want to stretch the opposite, so I'm going to stretch all the flexors, the hip flexor system attached to the head of the femur, the top of the thigh bone, and actually those hip flexors actually can run to the spine, so around the navel level, deep to the body, and they flex the hip, and then they do a few other actions as well, but the primary action is flexion of the hip or knee to chest. So, if I want to stretch those, I'm going to attach the band around the foot. I'm going to X the band over to get a firm grip. I'm going to wrap those strands of band around the back of the ankle. So cool, so now I've got a good grip here. If you're flexible enough just to grab your foot or ankle, like so, without any knee trauma or stress or strain, the hand is absolutely fine with this. But just for demonstration purposes, I'm going to take that theraband, I'm going to X it, as in X, the letter X, and then I'm going to wrap it around and hold on to it. From here, I'm on my side. The opposite knee is up towards my chest to the point where I can tap it with my underneath hand. I'm also making sure that my waistline and ribs don't sag into the floor, but I'm pulling up. At this point, My knee is flexed, the active knee, and I'm going to press back, not necessarily with the use of my hand, but I'm using the muscles of my hip. We talked about activating a muscle group or a series of muscles in order to stretch or lengthen the opposite. I'm using that approach again. So I'm contracting my hip extensors or gluteals and hamstrings to bring my leg to the back, and that automatically releases the hip flexor, and that's my goal. I am adding a little assistance on the band as the leg goes back, and I'll do that 10 times with about a 2 to 3 second pause, actively releasing the hip flexor, in this case on the right side. I'll do that on both sides, and then add a little bonus stretch for the hip flexor is to move into that traditional lunge. So I'm in this, call this right angle pose. I'm going to take my pelvis and I'm going to tuck it slightly under. So I'm going to send my hip down in the back and up in the front. That automatically starts to activate my thigh quadricep, but I'm really trying to get to that mid and higher thigh. And then I'm going to take a little shift forward until I feel a pull, comfortable, against the front, mid, upper part of that thigh. You may feel it lower as well, as long as it's not painful or uncomfortable. It's cool. Take the same arm as leg overhead. Because of the nature of the attachments, if I reach that arm over my head, or if I place the hand on the opposite side of the head and reach the elbow up, I can lengthen both ends of that muscle group. And then if I add a little bit of a lean, in this case I'm gently lifting high and leaning to my left with that tucking action, I can really feel that lovely hamstring stretch. And I would hold that for about 10 to 30 seconds. So that is kind of a holding stretch versus those active stretches that we did before. So a couple of ideas. I started with those hamstring stretches, and then I went to the hip flexor stretches. There's like over 600 muscles in the body. So if you want to target a muscle and you use those concepts of active range of motion with assistance, then you'll probably be much more successful than just hanging out in a pose and kind of praying for a miracle, right? So be safe, be strong, be flexible, keep dancing. Thanks, Dance Family. Awesome. Have a great day.